Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Part 1. First Love. I met the woman I thought was my true love in high school when I was in the 10th grade. Her name was Carol Manning, and she was beautiful with long blonde hair and shining blue eyes. She was one of the most popular girls in our class. We were the same age, and every boy wanted to be with her. I was Brad Wernicke, kind of skinny, a little tall, and a bit awkward. I understood why she wasn't interested in me. I was shy and not really confident around girls. I wasn't very good at sports, and I didn't have any special skills in art or music. The first time I saw her was at her 16th birthday party. She was dating a high school dropout named Vernon Smithers, who was 2 years older. He wasn't nice and often looked tough, working on cars with dirty hands and showing off his strength. He was known for scaring people with his stare. He had two things going for him, a part-time job and a car, but I didn't like him. At her party, she was wearing a corduroy jumper and white knee-high stockings. Her hair was flowing and she smiled at everyone. She seemed like a goddess. I wasn't even invited, I had come with a friend. But then she spotted me across the room. She didn't know me, but she walked right over to me, smiled, and came close. She put her hands gently on the back of my neck and surprised me with a quick kiss. Then she stepped back, giggled, and playfully pinched my cheek before turning back to her boyfriend. I felt nervous seeing him, but I didn't care. I had fallen in love. She must have felt something too, because she looked back at me before turning to Vernon. He noticed and gave me a smug smile like he was better than me. Carol reminded me of a character from the movie Footloose, charming and confident, always drawing attention. I couldn't help but think of my English teacher, Mrs. Warheim, who loved Dickens. To me, Carol was like Estella, and I was like Pip, just admiring her from far away. But I was determined to get to know her better. By graduation, I managed to stand out among the other boys, and it became just the two of us. Luckily, her parents encouraged her to move on from Vernon. On graduation day, we celebrated by going to the beach together. I was new to relationships, but I was excited to explore this bond with her. We shared sweet moments in the back seat of my old Ford. I remember the joy of those summer days together, getting to know each other better. One of the best parts of my old car was its big front seat, where we could relax and enjoy driving along the country roads with the music loud. At first, Carol would playfully blow her warm breath around me, making my heart race. Soon enough, we would find a quiet spot to park, lean back in the seats, and enjoy those close moments. Afterward, we would sit side by side and dream about our future together. Our talks flowed easily, and I loved spending time with her. September came, and I was heading to college. I wanted to be a math teacher while Carol aimed to be a nurse. I attended a local college, and she lived in a dorm near a big hospital. Over the next 4 years, our relationship had its ups and downs. I had to juggle school and my job, and being almost 20 miles apart made it tricky to spend time together. During this time, I learned a lot about growing up. One day, my father collapsed at work due to a serious brain issue. He spent days in intensive care and had to have surgery. He came home afterward but couldn't move around much. This change left us all struggling. He couldn't work anymore and received a small severance, which put a lot of pressure on our family. My mom worked hard to support us while I took on more responsibilities for my younger siblings, my brother Todd and my sister Susan. Todd faced difficulties in school after Dad got sick, and there were times when Mom had to go to the police station to help him. Susan brought her own challenges with her growing popularity, and we had to stay on top of her friendships to keep her safe. Todd was brave, often standing up for the things he believed in when it mattered. As for Dad, he watched us but couldn't step in to help. He used to be strong, the one who held our family together. After he died, everything changed. Mom was heartbroken and lost her spark for life. She wandered around the house, and I could see how much she missed him. It became clear how easy it is to take loved ones for granted until they are gone. With Carol, we broke up a couple of times but always found our way back to each other. Now, looking back, I realize those breaks were likely when she thought she had found someone else. I always wanted her to be with me, but I couldn't shake my worries. I wanted her to stay loyal, even if we weren't engaged until my senior year. I wanted to trust her, but found it hard. One time, my doubts got the best of me. I kept calling her, hoping we could talk things out, but her friends often screened my calls. They would often yell at me, saying I wasn't being fair. They told me that Carol cared for me, but she sometimes needed time alone. They said she was in the dorm but often felt sad and shared her struggles. I had never been unkind to her. In fact, I often felt unsure around Carol because I admired her so much. I started driving into the city to see if anything was wrong, but I found nothing. Carol had a car, but it was parked in a big garage. The only way to know if it was there or not would be to walk through all the levels. I could either sit in my car outside the hospital or drive around it, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. In the end, I only made myself anxious. I loved her deeply, and it was hard to be away. My dad was at home, unable to move much, while my mom was in and out, and I was driving around in confusion. Sometimes I wondered who had it tougher. Maybe it was Dad. Eventually, I graduated and got a job teaching high school math, while Carol found work at a pediatric clinic near where we grew up. We got married in a nice ceremony and started building our lives together. A few months later, Carol became pregnant with our first child, a boy we named after me. A couple of years later, we had a little girl and named her Bridget after Carol's mom. With 2 kids, Carol chose to use birth control instead of having surgery, and I supported her decision. I hadn't considered then that it might lead to issues later. Life moved on, and it was good. We bought a small starter home in a quiet neighborhood. With help from her mom, Carol managed not to miss much work. She still worked at the clinic while I climbed the ladder to become principal at a larger high school. Throughout this time, we stayed close. There were no long trips that kept us apart, though I was occasionally gone for a few days for work. Carol had some chances to attend educational programs, but overall, we were there for each other. However, when our son entered 6th grade, I started to feel that something was off. It wasn't anything obvious, but I sensed some change. Small details began to bother me. Carol always liked nice clothes, but I noticed her style had shifted to shorter hems and more casual wear. I kept these thoughts to myself. I also realized we had stopped discussing our long-term plans. While Carol still planned day-to-day activities, anything further ahead became less important. It may seem minor, but we had once enjoyed camping trips and planned to upgrade from a tent to a trailer. Carol had been excited about saving vacation time for a longer trip, but her enthusiasm seemed to fade. When I suggested places to visit, her responses became vague. She would often nod but not engage much, as if she had her own thoughts on the matter. At that time, technology like cell phones and the internet was just beginning, and I couldn't imagine hiring someone to spy on my wife. Trusting Carol with our finances didn't sit right with me either. We managed a checking account, but I rarely used it, relying mostly on cash. Carol did the shopping, and we talked about money only briefly. My worries didn't stem from our finances. As a principal, I was involved with various school events, especially during the fall, winter, and spring. While I couldn't make it to every game, I was expected to be at most of them, which sometimes left Carol home alone with the kids. I had to think about this situation carefully. Carol also had her own job responsibilities, with occasional trips for work. I didn't question her assignments. I thought they were strictly professional, but it made me wonder. Carol was home with the kids, but did she spend time with others? Next door lived Jenny, who babysat. I suspected something may have started in the fall of our son's 6th grade year, with Bridget in 4th grade. While I was at football games, Carol handled everything well, and it felt easy for both of us. Occasionally, I would take the kids to a game, which they loved, and they thrived around older kids. It was a good arrangement for everyone, and I noticed Carol seemed happier too. I wanted to be straightforward when discussing things with my son about relationships. It struck me that there seemed to be different kinds of situations in relationships. I was a teacher, while Carol worked in a medical field alongside doctors who are respected for their work, saving lives and dealing with serious issues. Both of our jobs were important, but the nature of her work might overshadow mine, especially with families involved. We both came from working-class backgrounds, so doctors held a special place in our minds. As a teacher, I dedicated my time to helping young students grow, while Carol admired her coworkers, who were respected professionals. Sadly for my family and me, one of these doctors focused on treating children with cancer, making our situation more difficult. No principle, no matter how important, could match the heroism of a surgeon saving the lives of children suffering from serious illnesses. I never thought of Carol as the type to be unfaithful. I was very naive. I met Dr. Maynard Gilmore once at an event organized by Carol. I liked him. He seemed friendly and trustworthy. He wasn't married, having gone through a divorce, but it didn't bother me at that time. After 12 years of marriage and 2 kids, I believed in my wife. I was wrong, completely wrong. I didn't really think there was anything wrong in our marriage. I didn't look for signs of trouble, even though they were there. Carol had been acting differently, especially during basketball season. While I was out with the kids on Fridays, she was often busy on other nights. Sometimes she came home late, and I noticed a change in her appearance. Carol had always cared about her looks, always in the latest fashions and perfectly styled hair. But one night she came home looking disheveled. Her hair was messy, her makeup was uneven, and her clothes were wrinkled. At first I overlooked it, but soon I couldn't ignore the signs. Finally, I asked her what was wrong. She looked surprised and admitted she had been out with friends, including Dr. Gilmore. She seemed a little off, having had some drinks, and then in a moment of frustration she told me, "For goodness sake, Brad, I know you know." I replied honestly, "No, Carol, I don't know." That's when she told me, "Me and Dr. Gilmore, you know." In that moment, I felt as if my world had shattered. My mind raced, filled with thoughts and feelings I couldn't grasp. I had read how people sometimes feel disbelief after a major change, and I felt it then. The connection we once had was gone. "You're leaving me," I said, realizing how true it was. It was a sudden shift from being a couple to feeling empty. That night, I was heartbroken. Carol sat there trying to gather herself. She claimed, "Brad, I love you. I've always loved you. I'm just not in love with you anymore." Those words hit me hard, and I felt anger rising inside me. I stopped being shocked and felt a rush of frustration. It was time to react. I glanced around the room, and next to me was her curio cabinet. In a surge of emotions, I rushed toward it. I grabbed it hard, and the door broke off. I began to pull out her precious items, sending them crashing to the floor. I moved through the living room, smashing everything in my path. I was driven by deep frustration over what was happening. Carol pleaded with me to stop, but I couldn't hold back. I broke open the picture of us on our wedding day, tearing it apart and scattering the pieces. "Hurrah! It's over!" I shouted. Then I moved toward the kitchen and began destroying the special things she had collected, feeling a deep emptiness settling in. Everything felt meaningless. I picked up one kitchen chair after another and smashed them against anything in my way. I bent down and pulled out dishes, throwing them around the room. I even broke the faucet. She was following me, crying and begging. She didn't understand. Every little thing in the house seemed to remind me of her. I opened the refrigerator, and soon everything inside was everywhere: milk, iced tea, leftover chicken. Nothing was left. I felt so overwhelmed. Then everything went quiet. Standing in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room were my 2 kids. They looked scared. Bridget spoke softly, probably saying, "Daddy." I sank onto the last chair that wasn't broken and cried. I hadn't cried like that in a long time. Carol took the kids back to bed and returned to the kitchen. I was still upset, but she stayed calm. She looked at me and said firmly, "You should leave. Pack a bag and just go." I looked around. The mess, the chaos. She was right. I knew if I stayed any longer, my kids would suffer more and I could end up in a bad place. I went upstairs and packed an overnight bag, surprised at how steady I felt. All my denial and sadness faded away. I just needed to leave. I moved into a motel room, then found a small apartment nearby. I felt sad, yes. I was very unhappy, but I was determined to move on. My father had been through worse. I knew I could do it because I was my father's son. As I thought about sharing this with my son, who was almost 20 years old, I wondered how I had managed to stay calm afterward. My son told me how scared he and Bridget were that night. He mentioned that Bridget was upset for days, but I already knew that. Carol didn't wait long. She was straightforward. One Thursday night, she decided to get a restraining order. She found a tough lawyer. I was served the following Friday. At least she didn't have me served at work. I thought about how to explain to my son the difficult weeks that followed. I hired a lawyer. Carol had hers, and we all met at her lawyer's office. The tension was thick, but we managed to agree on a fair settlement. I still wanted to know why this was happening, but she didn't have an answer. She told me she had fallen out of love with me and needed to move on. I asked why she hadn't come to me earlier, suggesting that we might have worked through it. I told her she was the only one I ever truly cared for, and I couldn't imagine being with anyone else. That's when she struck a deep chord in me. I can't recall her exact words, but their impact stayed with me for a long time. She said I no longer fulfilled her needs, that she'd outgrown me. She told me I was boring, and life with me had become dull. I wasn't enough for her. She shared that she didn't understand how inexperienced I had been when we first met. She mentioned her previous boyfriend, adding that she had only started dating me because her parents disliked her relationship with him. She said she kind of liked me, but never really loved me. I was just someone they thought was suitable. She admitted that I was comfortable to be with, but there had never been any real excitement. That hit me hard. It felt like Carol was reading my thoughts while smiling knowingly. She said she couldn't believe that during our years together, while I was in college and she was training to be a nurse, I hadn't explored other relationships. I told her I hadn't. She shared that she had been with several people during nursing school, discussing names and places that aligned with the times we had drifted apart. She said I had been naive throughout our time together. I was crushed, and watching her talk, I could see she was enjoying it. Discovering the truth about her was more painful than the separation itself. Still, I sensed something else was going on with Carol that day in the lawyer's office. Her words felt too rehearsed. Even while she spoke, I thought there might be some underlying reasons for her anger beyond just the house. She sometimes paused and suggested I needed someone better, someone I could rely on. I started to see there was more than just anger. There was also guilt about her choices. I was too upset to see it clearly. Carol had her own struggles. But thinking of our years together, the experiences, the dreams I believed we shared, none seemed to mean anything to her. I felt like I had just been a temporary solution for her. Arriving at that meeting, I thought I hated her. By the end, I felt nothing. She was no longer important to me. I think she noticed it in my eyes. The settlement surprised me at first. Carol wanted the house, and she got it. We had just refinanced the mortgage, and she took care of everything before her confession. Carol had always managed our finances. I had never thought to check. Was I surprised? She actually earned just slightly less than me. Our savings were split evenly, but much of it had gone into the house, which didn't make much difference now. She was generous with child support and didn't ask for alimony. Of course, there was a catch. I could have taken action against her and Gilmore at work, which was tempting, but it would have only caused them minor troubles. Carol could have faced serious consequences, but I thought it best to let her keep her job and move on. I wanted peace for myself. She was good with the kids, too. She could have really used them against me. With what I had caused and knowing I had pushed her, she had plenty of power to make my life difficult. As for the kids, I would have them every other weekend and one school night each week. She promised to make it easy for me. I knew things would be hard at first, especially since I needed a good place to live, but I believed I could figure it out. There was one more issue. I had caused a lot of damage, and Carol wanted repayment for her personal losses. I agreed, even though it was a significant amount since I was at fault. Lastly, we agreed to share the legal fees. Excluding our personal items and cars, everything else got divided evenly. At the end of the meeting, I reached my hands across the table toward Carol. She pulled hers back. I said, "I want to thank you." She looked confused. She stepped back a little and looked at me, a bit confused. She asked, "What for?" I replied, "Carol, our marriage has had its struggles, and everything I thought we had built seems uncertain now. But I still want to thank you." She seemed surprised by my words. I continued, "I want to thank you for 20 of the happiest years of my life. I want to thank you for the dreams I thought we shared. I want to thank you for our 2 wonderful kids." I paused to take a drink of water. I wasn't thinking about the kids and our connection through them. Instead, I felt this might be the last time I saw her. I finished. "I know we're done. Our time together is over, but I still have my memories. Carol, I will always remember you. I cared for you deeply, and I'll treasure the memories of the amazing person who brought my dreams to life." She started to cry, and I felt I had to leave. I walked away feeling lost. My wife, whom I had loved with all my heart, was not the perfect person I had thought she was. My beliefs about her were shattered. It became even more complicated when I got to see the kids, and she didn't try to stop me. However, she began to speak poorly of me. I had made mistakes, but it felt wrong for her to twist our history. Carol turned everything good we had into something negative. She filled their minds with misunderstandings and sometimes outright falsehoods. They were young, only 11 and 9, and it was easy for them to believe her words. Before long, they started to find reasons to keep their distance from me. It didn't make sense. Carol seemed upset, and I couldn't understand why, since she appeared to have what she wanted. I was losing not just my wife, but my kids too. Then I started to see small positives. First, I needed a decent place to stay. I didn't have money to buy one, but my mom supported me throughout this. Mom and Dad had always saved well. Mom spoke to my brother and sister, who understood and offered help. Together, they helped me with a small down payment for a second-floor condo. It had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, a full one and another with just a toilet and sink. The condo was part of a larger complex with a gym and a large pool. It wasn't a house, but it would do. My kids might try to avoid me, but when they did come over, they wouldn't be in a shabby apartment. The second small blessing came from Carol when she married Dr. Gilmore a few months after our divorce. This was good news for me and the kids. Suddenly, their mom had a new life and became too busy to concentrate on them. My kids started to see another side of their mother that we hadn't known before and began to realize they had new possibilities. They could spend regular time with babysitters or have more time with their father. They enjoyed coming to my place with the pool and gym, and they even visited my school. They were young but not unaware. I could tell Carol's indifference was hurting them. I wanted to comfort them. Then Carol gave me another unexpected blessing. She was expecting a baby. I thought this might explain why she hadn't taken steps to prevent it. Did I believe that? I wasn't sure, but Dr. Gilmore wanted kids, and Carol seemed happy to oblige. So within 2 years of our divorce, I was seeing my kids more than she was. Since they had to switch schools because of their new house, we altered the visiting schedule. Carol took them every other weekend and 1 day a week, which meant I got to see them the rest of the time. My life was changing for the better. But not everything was good. Work was tough. I had been doing well for a long time, yet no one really knew what was happening in my personal life. People noticed Carol's absence, but few knew the true story. As time went on, word about my divorce spread, and I felt like a shadow at work. My kids were at all my games, and the students became curious about why I seemed different. They all knew that Mr. Wernicke's wife had left him for a doctor. It felt like a story out of a novel, and my respect faded. Another issue was my self-esteem. Carol had not only broken my heart, but had kept her true self hidden from me for almost 20 years. I struggled to accept this. I needed to improve myself. I wasn't out for revenge. That was in the past. But I had to prove I was still a man. So for the first 6 months, I hit every bar and night spot in town. I sought companionship, dated, and tried to move on. I made a fool of myself, having many short encounters that meant nothing. The more I engaged, the unhappier I became. I found myself in places popular with Carol's friends. I didn't plan it. It just happened. During that time, I got a new wardrobe and a new car. I went to the gym and swam all the time. I lost weight and got stronger. Eventually, some of Carol's friends spotted me out with someone new and shared the news with her. She never called me, and I didn't see her, but I heard through the kids that she was upset. I wondered why she felt that way. Hadn't she gotten what she wanted? More questions, and still no answers. Part 2. Something good came into my life unexpectedly. I felt I was struggling, and it showed at work. It took another woman to point this out to me. I had always noticed Miss Fitzgerald. She had a special look, short, with reddish-brown hair, freckles, and bright green eyes. She reminded me of a character from a storybook. Everyone, including the kids, liked her. However, not everyone appreciated her. Some teachers seemed to criticize her out of jealousy. Still, most of the boys admired her as she walked by, and the girls often visited her classroom. I tried to keep my distance. She taught history, a subject I found boring, but she made it interesting. She also managed the school store and taught banjo to some kids after school. I still remember my first conversation with Miss Fitzgerald after my divorce. I was sitting at my desk in my office with the door open, as I often did. People were usually a bit cautious around me, not because I was unfriendly, but because I was the principal. I could influence their schedules, although I rarely did. Since Carol left, I had become known as a serious figure at work. I had my reasons for this. I was in pain. As I sat there feeling a mix of pride and insecurity, Sheena Fitzgerald walked by. She looked in, and something must have caught her attention. She stopped, turned, and entered my office, closing the door behind her. I didn't realize it yet, but this meeting was going to change my life. Sheena came in and sat down, starting to speak. "Brad," she said, "I can see you're struggling. I want to help." I was surprised. I was her boss, and yet she used my first name. I replied, "Miss Fitzgerald, I'm fine. Can I assist you with anything?" She smiled and continued, "Brad, I'm almost 32 and I often feel unsure of myself. I have a 5-year-old daughter and some challenges at home, but I believe I can support you." I thought to myself that this was a good introduction, since talking about personal challenges is common among those seeking help. But then she said, "I can tell you feel stuck. I've been there too." I stood up and moved around my desk, trying to guide her back out of the office. "Miss Fitzgerald," but she kept talking. I knew her energy from how she interacted with her students. She stepped closer as she said, "Everyone knows what happened to you. Most people are sorry, but not me. I think you need my help." Her words took me by surprise. I stepped back, but she continued to approach. I noticed a brief moment where she seemed uncertain, putting her finger to her lips. I wanted to steer the conversation back, so I said, "Miss Fitzgerald, it's not appropriate to discuss personal matters." She smiled confidently, and I could sense my discomfort growing. I tried to focus on what I needed to say. She was dressed in her usual business attire, professional but friendly. I wanted to keep my eyes on her face. I stammered, "I don't think—" Before I could finish, she gently pressed her hand against my chest. It caught me off guard. I leaned against my desk, trying to regain control. "Miss Fitzgerald, this is—" She put her fingers to my lips, which felt shocking to me. I was sweating, feeling flustered. I raised my voice slightly. "Miss Fitzgerald! Please stop!" She paused, taking a small step back. "Starting tomorrow," she said firmly, "I want you to be my friend." She reached up and pretended to brush a speck off my coat, smiling widely. Then she stepped back, her confidence wavering. "Tomorrow," she said, finally leaving my office. I needed a moment to process her words. What could this mean? It seemed to me that she believed we could be friends, or maybe she saw me as a new opportunity. I realized I had to take action. I needed to find a way to have her transferred from my school. I planned to talk to Dr. Deshields, my supervisor. After calling her, I only reached her secretary, who told me Dr. Deshields was dealing with a situation at another school. I had a good guess about where she was, as changes were happening at Westwood High, where the staff faced many challenges. Handling difficult staff was tricky, often involving transfers instead of firings, which could be complicated due to various factors. I didn't want Miss Fitzgerald transferred to Westwood, as it would be a tough place for her, and I feared getting a new staff member who might not fit well. I thanked the secretary for her time, and said my call was just a casual one, asking her not to mention it. The next day, Sheena arrived wearing a pale green blouse that matched her eyes, along with a dark skirt and heels that drew everyone's attention. It was clear she wanted to make an impression. She was often near the main office, my usual space, leaving me feeling overwhelmed. At the end of the day, as I was heading to my car, she approached and asked for help with some boxes. After I assisted her, she lightly touched my cheek, and my thoughts flickered back to Carol. Sheena mentioned wanting to meet after school on Friday at Denny's nearby. I told her that wasn't possible, as I could face issues at work. She said that wouldn't happen if she didn't complain. She insisted that I needed someone to talk to, and she thought she could help. I found her claims hard to believe, but she just smiled. That conversation happened on a Wednesday. By staying in my office, I managed to avoid any direct contact on Thursday and Friday, even though she tried to reach me. I occasionally peeked outside. I had to admit, even though she was slim, she was attractive, different from my ex-wife. It was winter, and Friday was cold and windy. I didn't think Miss Fitzgerald would wait outside in the cold parking lot for me. Out of curiosity, I decided to drive by. Sure enough, she was there, looking cold. This was silly. I parked and got out of my car, planning to have a serious talk while walking her to her car. As I got closer, I began to say, "Miss Fitzgerald." She smiled and waved as she came toward me. I had parked in a way that meant we had to meet at the restaurant's front door to get her to her car. When she reached me, she took my arm and said playfully, "You look like a Grand Slam to me." The Grand Slam was my favorite dish at Denny's. I replied, "I can't stay long, maybe just a coffee." By then, her arm was linked with mine, and she cheerfully said, "We'll see." School dynamics have been around since the first schools opened in colonial Massachusetts, often done quietly. Over the years, I had seen a few examples of this. I remembered a time when I entered the English department's book room to get a copy of the 10th grade curriculum. Inside, I found a young teacher and the department head in an awkward situation. They quickly noticed me, straightened up, and left. We never spoke about it again. I wondered if that was what Sheena was after, perhaps something a bit off. Sheena and I sat at a table across from each other at Denny's. I told her, "This is just a one-time thing. I only stopped because I couldn't let you wait outside in the cold." Her eyes sparkled, and I considered her intentions. She replied, "No, you wouldn't. That's because you're kind." She shifted in her seat and continued, "You know I've had a crush on you ever since you came to Oak Crest. My husband left me and our daughter just before you arrived. The divorce was hard on me, not just financially, but personally as well. I saw you with your kids. You were great and looked so happy." I felt uneasy but said, "I'm sorry to hear that. But I sense when your wife left. I may not know all the details, but I do know it was challenging." She reached across the table and took my hand, saying, "Please let me help." Clearly, Sheena was being open about her feelings. I had my doubts. Maybe she wasn't being completely honest. Still, I wanted to be straightforward. "Miss Fitzgerald, I appreciate your empathy, but I need to be clear that I don't see you that way." She leaned back and laughed. "Oh my God, I hope not. No one else ever has or will. No, I just want us to be friends. We can share stories. I know I can help." I leaned back too. I realized my earlier comment had an effect on her. It also dawned on me that she was likely exaggerating. Many people admired her. Then I thought about her support. I decided I didn't want that kind of help, but I enjoyed being around her. I liked her, not as a partner, but as a person. I corrected my earlier statement. "I didn't mean to say that you're not lovely. You're very pretty. In a different situation, I'd be interested, but we're colleagues. I have a school to run. I think we can be friends, but let's keep it professional," I added. She smiled and nodded. "Let's set up a get-together. I can bring my daughter, you bring your kids, and we can chat." I noticed her long eyelashes and the way she had her hair styled back, showing off small earrings with little emeralds. A soft strand of reddish hair slipped down over her left eye. I felt like reaching over to tuck it behind her ear for a better view, but I didn't. I said, "Okay, pick a day and time." She thought for a moment, then suggested, "Not this weekend. How about next Saturday? You choose where and what." I said, "No, you decide." She insisted, "No, you pick." I hadn't heard such remarks in years. I tried not to smile. "All right, next Saturday, I'll let you know the details next week." We stood up, shook hands, and I walked her to her car. She had a VW, quite different from Carol's style. We shook hands once more by her car. I helped her in, stepped back as she started up, and watched her drive away. Once she left, I felt second thoughts coming. I checked the time and realized I needed to hurry home before my kids arrived. Later that night, after I put the kids to bed, I foolishly looked through some old photos of Carol and me. When she left, she took no pictures of me, only a few of our kids, and left me with our wedding album. I don't know why I did it, but as I looked through the old images, sadness washed over me. I couldn't help but cry. I realized I needed to end things with Miss Fitzgerald before they went too far. The very next Monday, I was on morning hall duty when Miss Fitzgerald came in from the parking lot to get her morning mail and roll book. I guess my expression showed how I felt. Her cheerful attitude seemed to faded. I took a deep breath, put on a smile, and walked right up to her. "Good morning." I said loud enough for others to hear. Without holding back, I suggested, "There's a skating rink a few blocks from my condo. We could take the kids skating and then have lunch at my place." Teachers, students, and staff were passing by and heard every word, though they pretended not to notice. By the end of the day, I was sure everyone in the building would know that Miss Fitzgerald and I were spending time together. She looked unsure, and I sensed my earlier expression had worried her. Now she seemed uncertain about how to respond. She replied, "I never learned to ice skate, and my daughter." I reached out and touched her hand deliberately. "Perfect. I can teach you." Finally, she smiled, but I could still tell she wasn't completely sure. She replied, "Okay, let's do it." It just so happened it was the first week of the month. Most principals use that first Monday for meetings. I preferred the first Tuesday. Mondays were hard enough. The next day, Tuesday, when we met in the cafeteria, I subtly nodded to the table nearest me when Sheena arrived. She got the message and sat up front. I wanted to be open about everything. People would talk anyway. I wanted everyone to see this was about friendship and nothing more. The faculty meeting went as usual and was quite dull. After the department heads and athletic directors shared their updates, I asked for questions or comments from the group. This was always the toughest moment for me. I received the usual complaints. Why aren't we following this rule? Shouldn't someone be in the cafeteria making sure students pick up their trash? Why aren't you stopping kids from eating in the halls? And the common, "I won't attend any assemblies that start with a prayer." I listened to their concerns and reminded everyone to check channel WKRP for any announcements about school closings or delayed openings. I then emphasized that we were all here to teach, and we should focus on that. I thought about ending with a prayer, but I knew that could lead to a call from Dr. DeShields. I reflected on my school and some of my teachers, especially Miss Fitzgerald. There were a few teachers who seemed very focused on enforcing the rules. The county had a policy against leather coats in schools meant to address issues in some areas. Even though our school didn't have those problems, some teachers enjoyed enforcing this dress code. One teacher was particularly strict and familiar with school rules. There was an incident with a girl who received a suede coat for Christmas. This teacher spotted her and brought her to me, insisting that the coat was against the rules. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked. I found it frustrating she just wanted to embarrass me in front of others. The girl looked sad and said, "Mr. Wernicke, my coat is made of suede, not leather." I smiled at her and told her it was okay. I turned to the teacher and reminded her, "You heard her, it's suede." The teacher walked away visibly upset, and a few kids found the situation amusing. I took the girl to the office and explained what suede was. Later, I received a note from that teacher with a definition of suede highlighted in yellow. Then there were the assembly traditions. Some older staff members wanted every assembly to start with a prayer. I didn't mind, and no one else complained. A few teachers had assembly duty to supervise the kids. 2 younger teachers didn't like the prayer and said they would not help with assemblies if it continued. I accepted their request and reassigned them to the cafeteria, which was seen as a less desirable task. I chuckled to myself, imagining them standing in the cafeteria as kids tossed bits of food at them. I thought about these teachers because most of them seemed to criticize Miss Fitzgerald. She was always called out by the assistant principals. She arranged activities in her classroom and took the kids on field trips. She even let them leave the room when they needed to. In other words, Miss Fitzgerald, a creative teacher, was not favored by the rule followers. I wasn't sure, but I liked her. I thought if I acted carefully and kept things open, I could have a friend outside of work. Then things changed. We went ice skating, something I hadn't done since before my divorce. Bridget had skated a little, but Brad Jr. was quite good. We all had fun skating, even though many of us fell down, including me. Afterward, we made homemade pizzas and watched Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was a good evening, and my kids really liked her. I still had trust issues, but Sheena was showing me she was genuine. We started dating more seriously. Sheena suggested that we include our kids in future outings, and she made it clear she wanted to be their friend, not their mother. I was starting to feel attached to her, and couldn't believe it was happening again. Every time I expected something bad to happen, nothing did, and my life got better. I thought about what to tell my son about Sheena, her background, her experiences, and how she became a part of our family. Young Brad understood some things, but still needed to learn more. I remembered my struggles after the divorce, loneliness, and feelings of unworthiness. I often wondered where I had failed. I wished for answers, but I never received them. Sheena seemed to notice my feelings. We talked, which was difficult for me since I had become careful in trusting women. After I agreed to date her, I looked into her background and discovered very little. She graduated from a state college like I did and had a young daughter. There was no mention of a husband, making me think she might have had the child outside of marriage. I felt a bit suspicious and even drove by her apartment complex to see if she was with someone else. Our first dates were simple. We went to a diner or a casual restaurant and usually caught a movie. I was cautious because I didn't know her well yet. But as I learned more about her, it felt like reading an interesting book. One night, while the kids were asleep, Sheena opened up about her life. She shared stories, and I could feel our connection getting stronger. After spending time together, we found a good balance. It had been a long time since I felt that way, and she shared that she had never really felt close to someone until she met me. Now let's return to Sheena's story. Like me, she had fallen in love with her high school boyfriend, but they decided not to use protection. When she was in her junior year, Sheena found out she was going to have a baby. Her boyfriend wanted her to end the pregnancy, but Sheena stood her ground. They married and both worked to finish their college studies. Sheena's uncle was a judge. He helped her get settled at Oak Crest. Her husband started working as a car salesman. I had heard some rumors about Saabs he sold, but I wasn't sure if they were true. I usually chose Fords or Chevys, so it didn't matter much to me. She said he was a good salesman, but not very caring as a husband. She realized how important an emotional connection was only after they married. He never hurt her, but he wasn't very supportive. She had been inexperienced at the start and hoped for more kindness and connection before being intimate. Her husband thought her needs were too much and often showed frustration, saying she didn't respond well. Once, when she was too tired, he didn't take it well, which disappointed her. There were times he got upset with her for not meeting certain expectations. This made her feel uneasy, and she struggled to express what she needed. It took her a long time to feel brave enough to address parts of their relationship, but it still didn't feel right to her. She described her feelings about these experiences as negative. Sometimes he didn't prepare himself before they were close, which bothered her. Once he pushed her to do something she didn't want, and she stood firm. This led to an incident that made her decide to leave. He tried to convince her to come back, but she went to live with her parents instead. Her husband sought custody of their daughter, but her father got a court order against him. After her uncle found her a good lawyer, her husband finally stopped trying. When the divorce was finalized, she felt almost alone with just Laura, her young daughter. Sheena's parents stepped in since Laura was still a toddler, and her mother helped out. Reflecting on Sheena's situation, I realized that my own divorce, while difficult, was not as hard as hers. I had never felt scared or in danger of harm. I started to understand my feelings for Sheena, and it made me anxious. The idea of starting another relationship frightened me. She could see I was nervous and shared more painful things her husband had said. He had put her down, questioned her looks, and treated her more like an object than a person. He expressed the need for space, mentioning he wanted to feel free. Toward the end, she said he would go from being cold to being sentimental. He even told her he was seeing someone else who seemed to appreciate him more. Then he would feel sad and guilty, saying she deserved better, and that he needed a different kind of partner. Eventually, he admitted to being unfaithful, claiming he just wanted excitement and thought he could keep it a secret. He said she was dull and that he couldn't see a future with her. Hearing Sheena's story made me realize her husband echoed many of the feelings Carol had shared with me. It seemed to be a common theme among those who betray trust. Yes, both Carol and Sheena's husband acted unkindly, but they were not the right people for those they hurt. Through Sheena's story, I understood why Carol needed to leave me. It wasn't about careers or money, but because Carol recognized my value as a person. I believed I was better than Carol. She was the one who fell short, not me. I persuaded Sheena to leave her apartment and move in with me and my daughter. After a few weeks, Sheena and I gathered our kids for an important talk. They were much further along than we were. Soon after Sheena and I got married, our parents, my siblings and their children, and a few of our teacher friends were all there. I truly loved her. I felt like I had found happiness again. I believed she felt the same way. My feelings for Carol had changed. I no longer hated her, but felt sorry for her. It seemed that while my life was improving, Carol's was less stable. Carol had one child with Dr. Gilmore, but had separated from him. It looked like she had found someone better. She divorced Gilmore to start dating a heart surgeon. I was confused. We had been together for about 6 years and married for 12 before she left me. She had only been with Gilmore for a little more than 3. I suspected there was more to the story. Did Carol get her divorce? Did she find her heart surgeon? Yes, she did. And the last I heard, she seemed happily married. But with Carol, you can never be sure. I knew one thing. I had once thought I had everything I wanted only for it to fall apart. Now I realized I had a second chance, and I was making the most of it. Epilogue. Carol's story had been over for me for a long time, but whenever Junior visited, he always had something to say about her. He worried about her, saying every time he saw her, all she talked about was our past and our old marriage. He said she seemed stuck in the past. She once mentioned she felt a little sorry for divorcing me. I felt regret too. Back then. Now I just feel sorry for her. I think she's searching for something she may never find. She came to Junior's wedding but didn't bring anyone. I thought she had the heart surgeon. She could have brought him. She looked beautiful, as always. I danced with her once at the reception, and it felt nice to hold her. I still remembered her scent. We talked and laughed about old times. About halfway through the dance, I noticed Carol leaning in closer. I felt a bit shy. I glanced at Sheena, who was smiling. She noticed too. I thought, that's my girl. I was surprised when Carol mentioned Vernon Smithers. I wasn't sure, but I think I heard he opened his own auto shop. I wondered if Carol's parents should have allowed them to be together. Maybe Carol had found what she wanted at 16 and lost it. That was pretty sad. Back to real life. Soon after Sheena and I married, we had to find a bigger place than the condo. Now there are 8 of us, counting Junior and his wife. There's Bridget and Laura, of course. Since then, Sheena and I welcomed 2 more, Sean, who is now 10, and Eileen, who is 7. Sheena chose to stop teaching. She has gained a little weight, which makes her look softer, even more beautiful. She enjoys being at home, cooking, and caring for the kids. She still teaches banjo and does some SAT tutoring on the side. I'm supportive of all that. I'll say this. Sheena can have her do anything she wants, and that's a fact. I see Brad Jr. just drove into the driveway. He has only been married for a couple of years. I hope I'm prepared to support him with what he needs to hear. I wish him and his wife the best. She is a nice girl. If things don't go well, we will be here for him. That's what parents do. One last thing. Am I happy? That's a funny question. Story 2. I may have been a mistake when I was conceived, but I never felt like it growing up. I was an unforeseen accident between 2 graduating high schoolers, the shotgun child of Henry Hutchinson and Elizabeth Morrison. As my parents tell me the story, they were young lovers who became unexpectedly parents. My mom found out she was pregnant 2 weeks before their prom, and as she put it, my dad never hesitated for a second. Shortly after graduation, they got married, and my father got a job at the shipping docks, which was an hour out of town. In the beginning, he had to catch the company bus from town, which added another 30 minutes to his commute. 12-hour shifts were the norm at the plant, giving my dad about 4 hours a day of free time, not including the weekends. Although he grabbed as much overtime as he could, that impacted his weekends as well. It sounded like a recipe for a tough marriage. Too young, too poor, too much time apart. But my folks defied the odds. They say when you find your soulmate, all the tough stuff becomes easier. I grew up totally oblivious to the challenges they faced and could remember nothing but love and great times. Sure, I wish I had my dad around more, but when he was home, he was present. We did everything together as a family, cooking, eating, yard work, camping, fishing, and even shopping. I grew up watching my parents, who always held hands and showed affection. My mom's eyes would light up as soon as my dad walked in the door from work, and no matter what kind of day he had, he always embraced my mother. I soon learned the longer the hug, the tougher the day. In hindsight, I now realize how lucky I was. Being Jacob Hutchinson, the only child of Elizabeth and Harry, was pretty special. I say was, because life doesn't always follow our plans. 3 days after my 16th birthday, my mother was diagnosed with brain cancer. She was gone before I made it to 17. As hard as it was to lose my mother, the harder part was watching my father try to carry on. He always presented a strong front when I was around, but more times than I care to remember, I could hear him sobbing in privacy. He could have turned to alcohol to deal with his grief, but instead, he buried himself in his job and his son. We became closer than ever. The truth is, my dad was my best friend. I loved hanging out with him, doing whatever he wanted to do. That was easy, considering we enjoyed all the same things. My buddies all loved my father and treated him like one of the guys. He was always the voice of encouragement to have fun and to challenge ourselves, but he was also the voice of reason. He had a way of parenting all of us without ever feeling like he was trying to. Make a mistake, he'd pick you up and guide you past what went wrong. I remember when Billy and I accidentally caused damage to the woodshed. Choosing to have a bonfire on a windy day during the driest summer on record was not my best idea. Billy and I worked diligently to minimize the damage and prevent it from spreading too much. While we were fortunate enough to stop it from spreading to the fields or, worse, a neighbor's property, we couldn't save the woodshed and its 6-month supply of firewood. Your dad is going to be upset. I understood where Billy was coming from. I knew my dad was slow to anger, but we had just lost a significant amount of hard work, not to mention the structure. Yeah, you're probably right. Why don't you go home, Billy? I'll deal with my dad. Billy, you're not taking the heat by yourself. It was as much my fault as yours. If there's trouble to face, I'm right there with you. That was Billy, my best friend, and like a second son to my dad. He was made from the salt of the earth. Turns out we didn't have to wait too long. Since my dad moved into management at the docks, he'd been working shorter shifts and even coming home early some days. Before he could take his jacket off, I explained I had to show him something in the back. I watched his face as we got closer to the obvious damage. Billy and I explained what happened, making sure to take responsibility along the way. Well, my father began with a soft voice. I'm impressed that you were able to contain it. You saved a lot of people some grief. He surveyed the structure, assessing the damage. You guys okay? He asked as he checked on the walls. Yeah, nothing happened to us. I responded. He gave one last glance at the burnt wood, turned around and stopped right in front of us. I'm guessing I don't have to lecture you on what went wrong. He gave us a small smile. You guys free this Saturday? We looked at each other and shrugged our shoulders. All right then. Can you two finish knocking the rest down and make a burning pile for the fall? Yeah, for sure, Mr. H. Billy jumped in. You still know how to use a saw and axe, Billy? My buddy grinned and nodded. What say we head up to the cabin Saturday, cut a bunch of wood, load up the trailer and stay the night? If we get the trailer nice and full, we can go for some walleye in the morning. What do you think? Needless to say, we were on board and smiling. What 17-year-old boy doesn't like to swing an axe and work a chainsaw? Fishing was the icing on the cake. Billy said his goodbyes as my dad and I walked back to the house with his arm around my shoulder. I'm sorry, Dad. We should have been smarter. It's just wood, buddy. I'm glad you two are okay. I'm proud of the way you handled the aftermath. In a nutshell, that was my father. I met Faith in the 10th grade. Actually, we met years ago. It's a rather small town with its small schools and social circles, but we began dating after Christmas that year. She had met my parents many times indirectly, but she was formally introduced to my mom shortly after her diagnosis. My mother was instantly taken with her sweet nature, and more than once told me to hang on to this one. As things deteriorated with my mom, I leaned heavily on Faith. It really wasn't fair of me to do so in such a new relationship, but if she felt awkward or stuck, she never once gave a hint. She witnessed my parents' marriage as my father cared for my mom. Their impact on her was evident and emotional. Do you think we'd be like that, Jacob? I know we just started dating, but watching them makes me long for that kind of love. I know what you mean. I can't lie. I think they'll forever be my measuring stick for what a marriage should look like. I gave her a small gesture of affection. So, if you and I stay together, you can bet I want the same thing. Fast forward 10 years, and that's exactly what happened. Faith and I had gotten married when we were 20 and 21, respectively. I felt like we lived much like my parents. I loved coming home to her. We did everything together, but we also encouraged healthy friendships and hobbies. Unlike my folks, We waited until after high school to have children. We now have 2 girls, a year and a half apart, who are a spitting image of their beautiful mother. As good as things were for us, I still carried the pain my father could never seem to release. April, our 7-and-a-half-year-old, and Kendra, our 6-year-old, were the few bright lights in his world. Sure, we still hung out and did lots of things together, but his fire never seemed to come back. It was like he was going through the motions, a ghost of himself. At 46, he still had so much life ahead of him, but without my mother by his side, he seemed to just coast. He was now the operational manager at the docks and traveled a little for his position. He made amazing money, but unless he was spending it on his granddaughters, he would stuff it away. No trips, no hobbies, no fun. Faith and I encouraged him time and again to spend some money and time on himself. Tour Europe or visit the wineries in Italy something. Although he always nodded his head, we knew it fell on deaf ears. Jacob, I'm really worried about your dad. He rarely smiles unless the girls are with him, and the look in his eyes is so dark. I know. I see it too. I knew Mom's passing would be hard on him, but I figured he'd be back in the saddle by now, at least dating. I thought having grandkids would snap him out of his funk too. So concerned we were that we almost didn't take our winter trip. The thought of leaving my dad alone for 14 days was troubling. I never thought he would do anything drastic. I was just worried that he would travel deeper into despair. I wish my mom could talk to him somehow. On the advice of my wife and the insistence of my father, I limited my check-in calls to every other day. By and large, he sounded okay, normal for him anyway. However, on the 4th last day of our trip, my call to my father was full of surprises. First and foremost, he sounded happy. He even chuckled a few times. He hadn't chuckled in ages unless it involved his granddaughters. When I inquired about his new state, he grumbled, telling me nothing was different. I'm telling you, honey, it was like a switch went off or something. Was he really that different? My wife asked. Yes. We were both encouraged and nervous about what we would find when we got home. The girls ran to him once we passed the security gates at the airport. He was hugging both when we caught up. He stood and gave Faith a warm embrace, making her squeak. I got a hearty hug, complete with pats on my back. Who are you and what have you done with my father? I joked as we stepped back from our embrace. What? Can't a man be excited to see his family? He flashed a familiar smile and scooped up both our girls, carrying them toward the exit. What's gotten into him? I asked Faith, whose shock was evident in my dad's burst of energy and happiness. We trailed behind with our luggage, and when we got outside, we could see my dad standing beside his car with the girls talking animatedly to a woman. It finally hit me. He met someone. As we got closer, the woman, who didn't look that much older than us, looked up and smiled. Faith gave me a not-so-subtle jab in my ribs. After a quick wince, I opened my mouth. Hi, I'm Jacob, and this is my wife, Faith. I see you've met the girls. Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm a friend of your father's. She took a side glance at my father, and they smiled at each other. She was already pretty, but her smile was amazing. Better yet was the smile on my father's face. The ride home was filled with idle chit-chat. The girls were full of questions, and Cindy was gracious and forthcoming with children. When we arrived home, I invited them in for a quick visit, but they politely declined. They had plans for the afternoon, but we arranged for dinner tomorrow night. Before I could even get the suitcases on top of our bed, Faith was asking me about the new development. What did you think of her? She's young, huh? Your dad looked happy. I hope she's genuine. I chuckled at Faith's barrage of comments. Maybe we should wait to see what the relationship is about before we get too excited, honey. She continued. She's pretty though, right? Really? I never noticed. Faith gave me the tilted head, give me a break look. I scooped her up into a hug. Hard to notice things when my dream girl is already my wife. She playfully slapped my shoulder and laughed as she walked out of the room. Over the next 6 months, Cindy became a permanent fixture in my father's life, and by the looks of things, she was good at making him happy. He had the spunk and fire again. I just wished I didn't have the sinking feeling that she was too good. Every time I tried to discuss my feelings with Faith, she couldn't validate them. To her, Cindy was just what my dad needed. She thought it might be hard for me to move past the relationship he had with my mom. I couldn't discount her suggestion, but I wasn't totally convinced. One evening after dinner, with the girls in bed, my father and I sat on the deck while Faith and Cindy did the last of the evening's cleanup in the kitchen. My dad was sipping coffee, and his look seemed far removed from our location. "Penny for your thoughts, Dad," I queried. He came back to the present and gave me a guilty smile. "Was just thinking of your mom." His smile faded. "Please tell me you're not feeling guilty for dating Cindy, Dad. Mom all but told you to move on and find love. She'd be thrilled to see you happy again." He smiled and looked down at his mug. "Everything okay, Dad? You and Cindy are." He cut me off. "Things are fine." He looked like he was trying to choose the right words. "They're just different. I know what I had with your mother was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, Jacob. Relationships seem so complicated these days." I chuckled, mostly because he wasn't wrong. "Starting over must be scary, Dad, but it's nice to see you smiling again." He looked at me and then back to his coffee. It wasn't the response I was expecting. "Dad? Everything okay between you and Cindy?" He took a sip of his coffee and looked like he was about to say something when the women appeared outside. "And what are you two handsome men talking about?" Cindy was making her presence known. She had a big personality, and at first I thought it was good for my dad to help him break out of his shell. But lately, it felt more grating. Faith followed right behind, her face full of her beautiful smile. "Just talking about some old memories," I politely replied. Cindy's expression changed slightly. "You know, Jacob, your father is trying to move on with his life. Rehashing old memories doesn't help." I felt tension rise in me, but I suppressed my initial reaction. "Well, Cindy, my childhood is part of his past, and so was our time together. What normal father and son don't reflect on old memories?" I looked at her, almost challenging her to say something. I could see her bite her tongue and put on her smile again. "Yes, you two have quite the history. Harry loves to talk about those days." Now I could see how forced her smile was. "But now it's time to live in the present, right, Harry?" "Harry?" I thought I might burst. "Sweetie, maybe we should be heading back," she said, snuggling up beside my dad. After a few more minutes of awkward conversation, Cindy and my dad were pulling out of our driveway and heading back to his house. I wasn't keen on her moving in, but Faith tried to convince me it was a good thing. I gathered the last of the outdoor dishes and headed inside. Faith was putting something in the fridge when I came in. "What was that all about?" I asked. "Jacob, you don't need to use that kind of language," my wife admonished me. I put the cups in the sink and turned toward her. "You're right. Sorry." I smiled. "What was what about?" she asked, continuing to tidy up. "The whole live in the present thing. So my dad can't think about his past or my mom?" Faith turned around and stood right in front of me. "Honey, she has a point. Remember how worried we were when he couldn't let go of the past? This is a real opportunity for him to live again." What she said made sense. I guess my judgment was clouded by my gut feelings about Cindy. "I don't trust her," I blurted out. Faith looked shocked. "Honey, I get she's not your mom. No one can replace her. She's new, different, and younger. I mean, she's not too young for your dad. He's still young despite being a grandfather." She put her hand on my chest. "Are you sure you're not just being overly protective of your dad?" I looked back and forth between her deep blue eyes. "You think I'm overreacting?" She nodded her head. "Little soldier?" I asked. "Who calls a man's private parts that? That's a bit much." Faith burst into giggles at my opinion. "It's just a cute nickname, honey. I don't think she was trying to be rude." She could see I wasn't convinced. "It sounds like they're pretty close, you know?" She smiled when I grimaced. "What? Now you're talking with her about personal things regarding my dad?" "Jacob, she's not your mom. She's his girlfriend, and we're not that far apart in age, so we have a comfort level. I'm just saying that you should be happy that your dad is finding companionship." She emphasized the last part and laughed at my reaction. I pretended to be offended and chased her into the living room, scooping her up and jumping on the couch with her in my lap. Her squeals got me excited, and before I knew it, we were playfully roughhousing on the couch. We hadn't done anything like this since we had the girls. "Mom? I can't sleep," came my daughter's sweet voice from the top of the stairs, a reminder of why we hadn't had alone time since the girls were born. Faith giggled quietly and tried to fix her shirt. "Okay, sweetheart, go into your bed, and Mommy will be up in a minute." She nudged me away. "Your flirtatious ways are going to get us in trouble." "Stop being so charming then," I replied, and she smiled at me. "This isn't over, Mr. Hutchinson." "I hope not, Mrs. Hutchinson." I gave her a playful tap. Faith smiled down at me. "Trust me, honey. I think you're being overly protective of your father. I don't sense anything wrong with Cindy. If I do, I'll be the first to tell you. He's kind of my dad, too, you know." I watched her walk away and smiled at my good fortune. Faith was an incredible woman and the best wife a man could ask for. Life continued, and much of it involved the relationship between my dad and Cindy. She and Faith seemed to develop a good friendship, and the two joked that if she married my dad, Faith would have to call her mom. Personally, the thought made me uneasy, but I kept it to myself. My dad kept busy with his day-to-day activities and work. While he saw the kids more, he and I had barely spent any time together, just the two of us. I had been trying to encourage fishing trips or nights at the races, but it seemed Cindy always had plans for them during those times. After dinner, my dad and Cindy would leave as soon as the kids went to bed. He used to stay longer with Faith and me, but now Cindy had him ready to go the moment we shut the kids' doors. Faith and Cindy were giggling on and off throughout the night, a sure sign my wife had enjoyed a little too much wine. We cleaned up the last of the dinner dishes, and Faith was being extra affectionate. I wasn't complaining. I always appreciated her playfulness. Later, I waited in bed for Faith to finish in the bathroom. Usually, she wore one of my t-shirts to bed, but tonight, she came out smiling. She jumped on the bed and playfully straddled me. "Wow, someone's excited." "Can a woman show her man how much she loves him?" she said, leaning in playfully. I smiled, enjoying the moment. "What's wrong, honey? Where'd the passion go?" she teased as she noticed my hesitation. I finally turned serious for a moment. "I'm beginning to think the relationship between you and Cindy is getting a bit too close for comfort." "Why? What do you mean?" She looked puzzled for a moment, and then comprehension dawned on her. "Are you mad I called your—" "That's not really appropriate." "Relax, Jacob. It's just a joke. Now come back to bed and claim your wife." She patted the bed beside her. I understood this was a minor thing, but it was the root of a bigger issue. Faith, my wife, would never talk to me like that. In our relationship, we were always careful with words or phrases that upset the other. She didn't like it when I called her mama in front of the kids. I thought it was a term of endearment, but she explained that she was my wife. Mama was what the girls called her. I considered it silly, but I stopped because I knew how it made her feel. So her using the term little soldier felt out of character for our marriage. She knew I thought it was offensive when directed toward my father. Saying it to me was definitely crossing a line. Again, I knew it wasn't a marriage-ending moment, but that didn't stop the frustration growing inside me. Building on my distrust of Cindy and the changes in my relationship with my dad, this was becoming larger than it needed to be. I quickly put a cork on the initial words forming in my brain and walked into our bathroom, closing the door behind me. Her words penetrated more than just through the door. It felt like she pushed a knife into my heart. I rinsed my face and looked at my reflection in the mirror, wondering what was happening. I turned off the tap and dabbed my face dry with one of our towels. I couldn't stay in here, and I wasn't interested in going back to our bed. I considered the couch, but then I came up with a better alternative. I took a small, cleansing breath and opened the door. Without a word, I walked past our bed and into the hallway. "Jacob?" Faith murmured. "Where are you going?" All her earlier bravado was gone from her voice. "Baby?" I ignored her pleas and went straight to my daughter's bedroom. They still wanted to share a room despite the extra space we had. I laid down beside my eldest, April, who had the larger bed. I kissed her forehead, and she stirred in response. Within minutes, I felt Kendra slip in behind me. I was always amazed at how their little radars went off when the other one was getting more attention. I calmed significantly, lying between my daughters while they kept me warm and content. I sensed Faith at their bedroom door, but I didn't acknowledge her. I don't know how long she stood there, and sadly, a part of me didn't care. I awoke to the morning light streaming in through the edge of their blinds. I had no clue what time it was, but I slowly extricated myself from the various limbs wrapped around me and slid down the bed until my feet touched the ground. I turned and saw Kendra had snuggled closer to her older sister, which made me smile at their bond. I adjusted the sheets to ensure they were both covered and did a slow stretch, realizing that the bed was not made for adults as I made my way to the bathroom down the hall. After doing my morning routine, I quietly made my way to the kitchen, noting the big clock on the living room wall showed it was 5:45 a.m. It was earlier than I needed to be up, but going back to sleep wasn't going to happen. The first thing I noticed when I entered the kitchen was the smell of fresh coffee. Secondly, I noticed Faith, wrapped in her light housecoat, sitting at our little kitchen table. She caught my eye, but I wasn't ready for words just yet. I proceeded to the cupboard, pulled out my usual cup and poured a touch of cream from the fridge. Once my cup was full, I took a slow sip, savoring the hot beverage. Knowing I couldn't ignore the tension any longer, I turned around with my back resting on the counter, and we remained silent for some time. I could tell she hadn't slept well either. Her eyes were swollen, likely from crying. I fought my inner instinct to embrace her and comfort her as I had done so many times before. Instead, I looked at the far wall and took another sip of coffee. "You looked cozy, with the girls," she whispered over the table. I gave a half smile and nodded. "Jacob?" She searched for my attention. "Can you please sit with me?" Her look was desperate, and despite the bitterness I still carried, I pushed off the counter and pulled up the seat directly across from her. She struggled to say her next words, and I was more than content to let her figure out how she wanted to approach this. Finally, she took a deep breath. "I'm sorry." Her words were soft but heavy. "Sorry? What exactly are you sorry for?" I wasn't going to back down easily. "What's that supposed to mean?" She spoke a little louder. "I just want clarity. Are you sorry for disrespecting me? Sorry for insulting me, or just sorry you didn't get your little soldier last night?" Her eyes dropped to her coffee, and I could hear her sniffing, trying to regain her composure. I didn't mean anything negative when I said that. It was a bad choice of words. I was a little tipsy and should have been more careful with my words. "Interesting," I replied. "How long have we been together, Faith?" She didn't answer, so I waited, wanting her to say it. She finally realized I was waiting for a true answer. "It's been 11 years, Jacob." "You think I didn't know that?" Knowing it wasn't the question. "How many times do you think I've seen you drunk in those 11 years? She contemplated the answer and shrugged. "Twice. Both times I helped you into the bathroom when you weren't feeling well. In between each time, all you could say was, 'I love you so much. I'm so sorry.'" Her face reddened a touch. "I've seen you a bit tipsy enough times to know you're in a fun place and enjoying yourself. The thing is, not once in 11 years have you ever talked to me or treated me like last night. You're usually more affectionate, and I soak it all in. So you'll have to understand why I don't buy the 'I drank too much' excuse, Faith. It's never been like that. My fragile male ego? Where is this coming from?" I could tell my words rang true with her. Why was she fighting this? Why was she trying to play this off like it was nothing? I waited in silence. Finally, her head sank, and I heard the beginnings of her emotions. She stood and slowly walked around the table toward me, wrapping her arms around my neck, and leaned her face against me, starting to cry. I wanted to resist any comfort, but I couldn't. The instinct to console and care for my beautiful Faith won over. I held her tight and whispered soothing words as she sobbed. "I love you so much," she murmured between breaths. "I don't deserve you." Her words finally cracked my will, and soon I had tears running down my cheeks as well. We stayed like that until her exhaustion caught up and she rested in my lap. Taking care not to wake her, I worked myself from the chair and carried her into the living room, gently placing her on the couch. I covered her with the afghan she had knitted years ago and kissed her on the head before letting her rest. I then worked in the kitchen to make pancake batter for the girls. It was just a matter of time before my two sleepy-headed princesses wandered into the kitchen, wiping the sleep from their eyes. "Why is Mama on the couch?" my eldest asked. "Mommy had a tough night sleeping, so we're going to be extra quiet and let her sleep, okay?" Both my girls nodded. "Now, how about you help me make these pancakes?" With the kitchen a complete mess, we sat at the table enjoying our hard work when Faith moved into the doorway, leaning on the frame. We made eye contact, but before either of us could say anything, Kendra broke the ice. "Look, Mommy, we made pancakes with Dad. Come and sit down with us." Her excitement brought a small smile to Faith's face, and she pulled up a chair between her two girls. I got up and made her a fresh cup of coffee and a plate of pancakes, bringing them over to her. She smiled in appreciation of my kindness. I leaned down and whispered a warm greeting. Her eyes instantly began to get moist. She quickly stood up, embraced me tightly, and expressed her affection. "Ew!" Kendra shared her disgust at the sight of her parents being affectionate. "Geez, Mom, it's just pancakes," April chimed in. This made Faith giggle, and I felt her body jiggle against mine. "Yeah, but there are special pancakes," I smiled at the girls. "Don't we get a hug too?" Kendra innocently asked. Immediately, Faith broke her grip on me and embraced her two girls like she hadn't seen them in months. I had to leave the room as I started developing my own tears. We spent the rest of the day exchanging loving looks. We knew a big talk was coming, but we focused on giving the girls our attention now. We worked in the yard, including the girls, and had fun together. We tired the girls out, and bedtime came a bit sooner than usual. They fell asleep on the couch as we watched one of their favorite movies. When I returned from tucking the last one in bed, Faith sat on the couch and waited for me. We talked long into the evening. I think she could finally see my concerns about Cindy, and especially her influence on her. Faith admitted that Cindy had gotten into her head a little, but assured me she never crossed a line. She was more liberal than we were, and some of it caught Faith's interest, but it was just her curiosity. She admitted the fragile male ego comment came from something Cindy had said about an ex-boyfriend. "So was that the source of your anger when you asked if I was overly concerned with my self-image?" She winced at the memory. "I've never felt I had to establish anything about my self-worth, Faith. But let the record show that I know I'm nothing special. But my self-worth doesn't start there. It's in my character and how I treat other people. It's in the depths of my love. You were well aware of my qualities before we got married, so if I'm a disappointment to you, you should be angry with yourself. You could have walked away a long time ago." Once again, she was in my lap, crying. This time she rested against me on the couch. I was beginning to feel like this whole situation had deeper roots than I expected. "I love everything about you. I'm so sorry I said those things." She wiped her tears and looked me in the eyes. "Those words I said, while I know they hurt you, meant nothing to me. I was lashing out because I wasn't getting what I wanted when I wanted it. Can you ever forgive me, Jacob? I promise I'll never speak to you like that ever again. It breaks my heart how I treated you." She looked down. I could see her shoulders rise and fall as she tried to keep her emotions under control. I don't even know why I said those things." The tears continued to flow. The next few days and evenings were emotionally charged. Faith was extra caring, extra sensitive, extra careful. With time, things returned to how they were before, and even after a few evenings with my dad and Cindy, Faith was the woman I knew and married. I thought I overheard them arguing once, but Faith assured me I must have misunderstood the context of their discussion. I never heard a word, so I had to take her at face value. Was I a bad person for feeling slightly relieved that Faith had a disagreement with Cindy? I'll leave that up to you to judge. About 3 months later, I left work early. I wanted to stop by the house and talk to Cindy. It was clear we weren't exactly each other's favorite people, but she was in my dad's life, and I needed to be the bigger person. I knew he was in Chicago for a corporate announcement. All the important people were expected to attend. If it didn't involve a camper or a boat, my dad disliked traveling, especially by plane. Cindy wasn't feeling well, so she stayed behind. I saw it as a good opportunity to try and resolve our differences. I pulled into the property and sat in my vehicle for a moment, taking in the picturesque landscape. I smiled at the old woodshed that I helped build. The trees we planted when I was young looked full and healthy. I saw Cindy's little SUV in front of the garage and made my way to the front door. I used to enter through the garage without knocking, but out of respect for Cindy, my father asked me to start using the front door and to knock. I waited a few minutes and knocked a second time. Finally, Cindy came to the door in her housecoat. I immediately worried I may have disturbed her. "Oh, hey, Jacob, what brings you around?" She didn't look unwell. She seemed more worried. "Hey, Cindy, I'm sorry if I woke you. I knew Dad was out of town and I wanted to talk to you, but I can see it's not a good time. I'll let you get back to bed." Her voice cracked slightly. "What did you want to talk about?" "Look, Cindy, I think we both know we're not each other's favorites." Her expression turned serious. "I'd like to change that. You're in my dad's life, and I want us to find a way past these feelings." Her look softened. "Well, that's a really nice gesture, Jacob. Maybe when I'm feeling better?" "Yes, of course. I won't keep you. I'll call next time. Goodbye." I smiled and walked down the steps to my vehicle. I had heard people talk about their own instincts, and I was pretty sure the tingling in my brain was just that. I pulled out and left. My dad's property is set up in a way that you could see a car coming or leaving from a distance. Most people didn't know that after the first hill, there was a small trail maintained by hunters and trail riders in the area. Thankfully, it was well kept and just wide enough for my small sedan to navigate without scratching the sides. About 5 miles down that trail was a small opening where, if you sat on top of the hill, you could see the front entrance of my dad's place without obstruction. I reached into the glove box and pulled out Faith's binoculars. She used to be an avid bird and nature watcher. I pulled into the clearing as far as was safe and made the last trek by foot, getting to the top of the hill. I sat on a familiar log that had seen many moments from my childhood, waiting patiently. About an hour later, a small vehicle approached the house. I lifted the binoculars and saw it was a lone male. I watched as it got closer, and when I could see the whole side of the car, I noticed a decal on the driver's door. Lift. Why would she need a ride if she has her own? I shook my head at the silly question. As the car pulled up to the house, I shifted my focus to the front door. 2 minutes later, a man stepped out in jeans and a t-shirt. He was young, perhaps in his early 20s, and he stopped to look back at the door where Cindy had emerged, wearing the same housecoat. The front of the house was quiet as the car pulled away. I stood there, trying to make sense of everything I had just seen. Something inside me stirred a gut feeling I couldn't ignore. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of something my mother used to say. Problems don't solve themselves. Face them head on. With that in mind, I got into my vehicle and drove straight to my father's place. I walked to the door and knocked firmly. Not long after, the door opened. "Jacob, what brings you back? I thought you were going to call," came Cindy's voice. Without a word, I stepped past her and sat in my dad's recliner. "Why don't you come in?" she said with a trace of sarcasm, closing the door behind her and sitting on the couch across from me. "So what brings you by this time? I doubt this is just a social visit." Her demeanor had completely changed. Any trace of politeness was gone. "How long?" I asked, fixing my gaze on her. She tilted her head. "How long what?" "How long have you been dishonest with my dad while living here?" She gave me a look of mock surprise, but didn't deny it. "Pretty much since the beginning, I suppose." "You've been unfaithful this whole time?" She smiled slightly. "You didn't ask if I was unfaithful. You asked how long I've been seeing others." "What's the difference?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who says your father doesn't know? Maybe he's more aware than you think." That threw me. I sat back, uncertain. My father was a proud and private man, and the idea that he might have kept this hidden from me was hard to believe. "He loves you, Jacob," she continued, "but he doesn't talk about everything. You know he treasured what he had with your mother. We all did, but times have changed. Relationships aren't always the same as they were. If he's so great and you love him, why lie to him?" I asked. She shook her head. "It's not lying. It's just different expectations. Not everyone fits one mold. Some people provide love and stability. Others provide different kinds of support." I didn't know what to say. I was caught between confusion, anger, and disbelief. "Your father is a good man, Jacob. He's always been there for me in the ways that matter most," she added. The room fell into silence. I looked at her. trying to find any sign that this was just a misunderstanding. But the truth was clear even if I didn't fully understand the reasons behind it. Some part of me still wanted to believe in a simpler explanation, but I couldn't unsee or unhear what had already happened. That's why I love him so much. I had never felt so frustrated until now. This situation didn't go the way I planned at all, and I could see the smug look on her face. She knew she had gotten the better of me. It took everything I had to walk out, but she held onto my arm. "Jacob, I know this is a lot to digest. It's the main reason why your dad and I have kept it from you. He's a proud man and you're just like him. You may not like our situation, but I hope you can respect it for your father's sake." She placed her other hand on my shoulder. When you care for someone deeply, you find yourself willing to make sacrifices to ensure their happiness and fulfillment. Don't you want the best for Faith? My head snapped to look at her. Easy, Jacob. I know Faith had strong values when she married you. How long before she starts to wonder about what else is out there, what she might have missed? Funny, Cindy. It seems like you're the one who wants everything for yourself. It sounds rather self-serving. That dimmed her arrogance. Now let go of me. I suddenly feel uneasy. I pushed my way out the door. It's only natural to want your loved ones to be truly fulfilled. See you at the next family gathering, she called as I stormed down the driveway. I got into my car, slammed the door, and turned it around aggressively. Looking back in the rearview mirror for a moment, I saw her waving as I sped away. I drove until I reached the service station at the corner of the main road. I was fuming and realized my driving was erratic, so I pulled into the lot and parked hard. "Why is this happening?" I exclaimed, hitting my hands on the steering wheel. After my outburst, I rested my head on it, feeling as if my life had turned upside down. How could my dad not see that she was insincere? How was I supposed to talk to him? What if he was okay with this? I might ruin what little relationship we had left. I sat there for a few moments, finally calming down. Well, that escalated quickly. I put my car into drive and removed my foot from the brake. I remained lost in thought as I drove. She had gotten under my skin badly, and that angered me. After all, I believed I had the moral high ground. Didn't I? My thoughts were interrupted by a phone call coming through my Bluetooth. The display showed it was my wife, and at first I considered letting it go to voicemail, sensing things would get messy again. However, I answered out of habit. "Hi, sweetheart." Faith's lovely voice filled my car. "Hey, hun. Jacob, what's wrong?" My wife was usually quite perceptive, and my mood was hard to hide. "Jacob, baby? I just had a visit with Cindy." There was silence on her end, and after a few moments she asked, "Oh, that's nice. How did it go? What did you two talk about?" Was she probing? I hated doubting my wife's intentions, but I was there now. "I'm going to be a bit longer." "Why? What are you doing?" "I'm making a pit stop at the Legion." That was code for needing to grab a drink to calm down. I rarely did this, but today felt different. "Oh, okay, sweetie, don't be too long, okay? I'll keep your dinner warm in the oven." I responded with a soft sound of acknowledgement. "Jacob, I love you." She hung up before I could respond. Not that I had much to say. I arrived at the Legion 20 minutes later and made my way downstairs to the members' bar. While I held no true affiliations with the place, my dad had been a member since he was old enough to join. I was allowed to enjoy the bar and games room. I settled at the bar, and Glenda brought me a drink. She was about 70 years old, sharp as a tack, and had a way with words that could put anyone at ease. "Poured you a double, Jakey." I glanced into her eyes. "I can see you're not happy today." I lifted the glass, acknowledging her insight, and took a sip. The burn felt comforting. Though I wasn't a frequent whiskey drinker, I found solace in it during stressful times. Glenda had a knack for understanding unspoken feelings. "Isn't this where you ask me what's on my mind?" I offered her a slight smile. She chuckled, her laughter highlighting her years of experience. "Oh, sweetie, I don't care what's bothering you. Just know you're not alone." I nursed my drink for a while, taking small sips until I finally reached the bottom. When I placed the glass back on the bar, Glenda looked to see if I wanted another. When I shook my head, I stood up and she walked towards me. I was about to throw my money on the counter when her hand clasped over top of mine. "It's on the house, kid." I gave her a curious look. Glenda never gave drinks away. Go home and talk to the little woman." "That obvious?" I asked. Again, she barked through her smoky laugh. "Like a neon sign, sugar." She gave me a wink and walked away with my empty glass. I pulled into the garage and made my way into the house. I could hear Faith in the kitchen puttering around. I walked past the kitchen nook and looked into the living room. "Where's the girls?" "My aunt picked them up and took them to Rutgers for a bit. She's been dying to spoil them, and I thought it might be best if they weren't here when you got home." "Oh." I was surprised by her candor. "Honey, you sounded pretty rattled on the phone, and I didn't know what kind of shape you were going to be in." She reached out and grabbed my hand. "I didn't want the girls to see you like that." I looked into her eyes and let my guard down. It was a thoughtful thing to do. I just hoped it wasn't a defensive maneuver. "Come on, let's sit in the living room." She led me to our love seat and sat us down beside each other. She turned slightly so she could face me. "What's going on, Jacob? This is not like you?" She took my hands into hers and stared at me. I love her eyes. They were the first things I noticed about her when we met. I took a deep breath as I tried to figure out how I wanted this talk to go. I let out my breath and spoke. "Are you happy?" My question caught her off guard. "I mean truly happy. With me? With us being married? Are you fulfilled? Do you think you've missed out?" "What are you talking about, baby? Is this still about my behavior? I'm so sorry if I made you doubt my happiness, but I promise you, I'm as happy now as I was the day you asked me out." I smiled at her words, and her face seemed sincere. "Okay, let me be a little more direct. Are you happy in our relationship?" "What? Why would you ask that? Of course. You make me feel valued, and you always take care of me. Why would you ask such a question?" "Well, I know you were inexperienced when we got married, and I was concerned you might be feeling like you missed out." "Missed out? On what?" She was staring me down. "What about you? You were inexperienced too. Are you feeling like you need something else?" "Absolutely not. I love being with you. I have no interest in anyone else." "So why did you ask me if I was happy?" "It was something Cindy said to me. It appears you two have been sharing some personal information." I saw her eyes drop a little as her cheeks went red. She seemed to know all about our argument and then made it sound like I was holding you back from being fulfilled. "Tell me, has she ever mentioned a guy named Len?" She tried not to react, but I could tell she had. Sensing a lie was coming, I went to stand up, but she held my hands and pulled me down before I could get up. "Wait." She gathered her thoughts. "Yes, I told her about our argument, mostly because she could tell we were off. I shared the derogatory line that messed us up, and she got mad at me for letting you influence me." I tugged again, but she held me firm. "I told her you weren't influencing me. It was my fault for disrespecting you, and she laughed at me. She told me that I needed to consider other perspectives. I had no idea Cindy would be a factor in this. I told her that I wasn't interested. Maybe it was good for her, but it wasn't something I wanted. I love you too much." I'm not sure if she realized what she said, but I yanked my hands free, startling her. "Do you mean to tell me that you knew she was seeing other men besides my dad?" Not only did her face go red, but her eyes began to tear up. She looked at the floor, and after a few minutes, she nodded her head, confirming she did know. "What about us? What lies are you telling me to keep me happy?" I pushed up from the couch and walked up the stairs into our bedroom. I pulled off my shirt and tie and tossed them on our bed. I made my way into our ensuite and shut the door. I washed my face and pulled some water through my hair. I stared at my reflection, wondering how everything went wrong so quickly. How would this impact our family, my daughters? I was roused from my thoughts by a soft knock on the door. "Can I come in, Jacob? Please?" Faith was sobbing. I reached over and unlocked the door. She slowly opened the door, and when she saw me, she ran into me, wrapping her arms around me tightly. "Please, let me explain, baby." She sobbed some more. I eased away from her, and having nowhere else to sit, I plunked down on the toilet seat. "Well, go on." A few months ago, Cindy hinted at having relationships outside of her marriage. Right away, I called her on it. I asked if she was cheating on your dad. She sat me down and told me how your dad was okay with her having relationships outside of their marriage as long as it didn't disrupt the family. She stopped to gather her thoughts. I didn't believe her, but she seemed very convincing. She mentioned that Harry wasn't as adventurous as she was, and if they were going to be together long-term, she needed some outlets. She said he was hesitant at first, but he realized that she loved him and would never deny him her affection. All the others were just a means to fulfill her needs. She said maybe one day Harry would be enough for her, but until then she was going to quietly enjoy the extra attention. She knelt in front of me and put her hands on my lap. Yes, she talked about another man and remarked on his qualities. She mentioned she could introduce me to him, but I declined. She appreciated my feelings of loyalty, but suggested that they might be misguided. Today's woman deserves to explore all of life's wonders, and seeking additional experiences was something I could embrace. "Do you feel that way?" I whispered. "No." I'll admit she got into my head a little and tried to shift my thinking. "I think that's what caused my lapse of respect with you." I shifted a little, and she stood up, facing me. "I don't want or need another partner, Jacob. You are my everything. You love me so much, respect me and my opinions, and are without a doubt the best dad in the world." She put both of her hands on my face. "Harry's a very close second, and that's why I never told you." She ran her fingers through my hair. "How was I going to explain to my loving husband that the man he admires is involved in a situation like this?" The thought made me wince. He's always been strong and proud. I could never bring it up with him and hurt him that way. I didn't want this for him, but he is a grown man who spent many years alone. Who was I to judge? She leaned closer to me. "I wanted to tell you, Jacob. I honestly didn't know how." Her head rested on my shoulder. Everything she shared rang with truth. Faith was never a good liar, even about simple things. I could feel the weight of her confessions rest on me, so I wrapped my arms around her gently. She adjusted until she was settled comfortably, her hands around my neck. "You were right to question the kind of person she is. I felt a connection with her because of the closeness in our age and that our dad seemed happy again. I wanted this for Harry so badly that I wasn't paying attention to the warning signs." She brushed her lips lightly against my forehead. "You were right." "I'm sorry, what was that?" I spoke up. "What was what? You said I was right? Can you repeat that?" "You were right." She said it again. "One more time." She caught on and lowered her face in front of mine. "You were right, Jacob." "Now in writing." I teased as she gave me a playful tap on the back of my head and a stern look. That expression slowly melted into her gorgeous smile. "Don't get used to it, mister." She stood up and pulled me by my hand. "Where are we going?" I joked. "To another room so we can share a moment," she said matter-of-factly. We lay together in a blissful moment, her warm presence beside me. I casually ran my fingers gently up and down her waist. "What do we do, Jacob?" The silence was broken by Faith's soft voice. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Do you think she's telling us the truth? I mean, she's not exactly trustworthy. Look at what she's caused between us." "Do you think Harry is truly okay with it?" I think that's the toughest part for me. I know I've had my dad on a pedestal. The relationship he and my mom had was something special. Faith squeezed tighter against me. "Maybe this is how he moves on. It's not like he can find another like my mom. Maybe he's okay with it because it's low maintenance. After denying himself for so long, maybe it's his way of re-engaging with life without requiring a commitment." Faith looked up at me. "Do you really believe that?" She stroked my cheek. I didn't have to answer. We both knew I wasn't convinced by my own reasoning. We quietly carried on the next day. It was Friday, and we made plans to take the kids on a hike after supper. Nothing too dramatic, just a walk through the woods. We brought binoculars, eager to spot something interesting. The girls had an absolute blast, running through the foliage and picking flowers. Faith and I reconnected at a level we had lost sight of, spending so much time focused on my father's life that a gap had appeared between us. Even on our last trip, it wasn't apparent then, but with everything that had transpired since, we both recognized it and promised not to let it happen again. After rounding up the girls, we headed home. The combination of running around and fresh air had worn them out, allowing us to enjoy a quiet drive back, holding hands and exchanging loving glances. When we rounded the corner before our house, despite the setting sun, my father's old red Chevy was parked in his designated spot. "I thought he wasn't coming home until Sunday," Faith whispered to me. "Me too," was my simple response. We each carried a sleepy little girl in our arms as we approached the front entrance. The door opened just as I stepped onto the concrete landing. My father smiled at the sight of his two granddaughters, greeting them warmly as we carried them upstairs to their room. I winked at Faith as she settled them under the sheets and headed downstairs to talk with my dad. I expected to find him on the couch, but he wasn't there, so I went into the kitchen, where I found him waiting at the table. "Dad, everything okay?" I approached him cautiously. His smile eased my concern. "Thought you were due back Sunday?" I asked. "I was. Some things have happened." "Are you ill?" He rolled his eyes. "I know I'm your old man, but technically I'm not even a senior yet." "Yeah, sorry. I'm just surprised is all, and you're acting a bit unusual." "I need to talk to you about something, Jacob." "What are the odds you could pour us a couple of drinks?" I laughed. "Pretty good." I moved to the liquor cabinet, pulled out the rum we both enjoyed, and prepared our drinks. Sitting down, I pushed a glass in front of him. We lifted our glasses to each other and took a sip. "I forgot how good that tastes," my dad said. "So, are you going to keep me in suspense?" I raised my eyebrow. Before he could start, Faith walked in and immediately noticed the two drinks in front of us. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll leave you two alone." She turned to leave, but my dad gently grabbed her arm. "I'd like you to stay, dear." Both Faith and I were surprised. It wasn't that we didn't talk together, but usually drinks meant a more private discussion. "If that's the case, maybe I should have one too," she said, pointing to our glasses. I nodded and got up to make her a drink as well. "Not like you two. Remember, I'm a lightweight." She smiled and sat down. I handed Faith her drink, and we exchanged glances, both sensing the weight of the conversation ahead. "Kids, I need your help with something." "You know we will, Harry." Faith reached over and took my dad's hand. He looked at it, then back up at Faith, offering a small smile. "I feel I haven't been the best man of late, and I don't know how to fix it." My stomach turned. It was hard to accept the changes in my dad's life, and I could only imagine how difficult it must be for him to share this with us. "It's okay, Dad. We're both here for you," I encouraged. He took another sip of his drink and glanced between us. His nerves were evident. "I met someone." It took a moment for the words to register, and I could only imagine how my face looked. Thankfully, Faith recovered quicker than I did. "What do you mean, Harry? That you met someone?" My father shook his head momentarily, then focused back on us. "When I met your mother, all those years ago, I knew quickly that she was going to be my wife. As challenges arose, your mom and I grew closer. We were prepared to put in the effort." He looked at a picture of him and my mom on the wall, among many family photos. He stood up, removed it from the wall, and offered it a tender look. He had never opened up like this before, and I felt tears welling in my eyes. A quick glance to my right revealed that Faith's cheeks were wet as well. He placed the picture down on the table, his smile softened by memory. It never felt like work with her. He took a deep breath. While at a corporate event recently, I found myself walking during breaks. It was during one of these walks that I encountered a woman having an issue with a taxi driver over the fare. As I approached, I heard the commotion. He described how he intervened in the situation, offering assistance to the woman who believed she was unfairly charged. When I found out the fare, I pulled out my wallet and asked for a receipt with the driver's name and cab number to discuss the situation further. I watched him panic, so I gave him 2 20s and suggested he get his meter checked. "I bet the guy's cab company would have had some choice words for him," I offered. "Why would that matter?" Faith queried. "The convention center is a high-income stream for cabs from the airport. The last thing the company would want is a bad reputation. The center would start advising people not to use them." My dad nodded in agreement with my assessment. He looked like he was struggling with his next words. Anyway, after the driver turned to leave, I felt a hand on my arm. When I turned to look at the woman, my dad looked upward, trying to control his emotions. My God, Jacob, I swear I was looking at your mother. I heard Faith gasp beside me. Her hand found mine and squeezed. Before you think I'm crazy, I know it wasn't your mother, at least not physically, but the connection was unmistakable. Feelings that had been buried since the day we lost her emerged from the deepest parts of me. It took me a few minutes to realize she had been talking to me. When I finally snapped out of it, she giggled and offered to buy me a drink later for my heroism, as she put it. Faith was tearing up at that point, and the circulation to my fingers was almost cut off by her grip. "Oh my goodness, Harry," Faith finally exclaimed. "Did you see her again?" My dad chuckled. At every opportunity. For the next few hours, we listened as my dad spoke of Rita as though he were back in high school. The attraction seemed mutual. The 50-year-old widow was as taken with him as he was with her. We laughed at his stories about their walks and dinners. They seamlessly shared their experiences about first loves and the sudden departures. They comfortably recounted how in love they were with their original spouses and the devastation that accompanied their passings. She had 2 children, both younger than me, but her son had started working for the same company as my father, so she was there to visit with him for the duration of the conference. I don't think we could have wiped the smile from my dad's face with a tractor. I remembered that look fondly. The stories were winding down when he took on a serious tone and stared at both of us. Faith was so close to me at that moment, she could have been sitting on my lap. "I know you're going to think me an old fool," he started, "but I have no doubt your mother was instrumental in this. I can feel it." He tapped his heart. "For the first time, I can think of your mother and feel happy. It's like she replenished my heart." Faith leaped from my side, pulling my father from his seat and enveloping him in a warm hug. "Oh my God, Harry, I'm so happy for you." I stood up and gently patted my dad's shoulder. My hug would have to wait. Faith showed no sign of letting him go. Finally, with a hint of embarrassment, my wife backed off, allowing me to give him a proper hug, too. When we released each other, he looked at Faith and said, "Now for the real reason I came here. How do I break this to Cindy?" I grabbed all of our glasses and went to the counter to refill them. As exciting as all of that was, I was worried about how we were going to navigate the whole Cindy situation. I could hear my dad asking Faith for her opinion. He had seen them foster a friendship, and he suspected she would have an idea of how to approach this with her. I sat down and put the fresh drinks out. I exchanged a knowing look with Faith, and without a word, I could see she agreed. This had to happen. "Dad, we wanted to talk to you about your relationship with Cindy." He took a sip of his drink and sat back, indicating he wanted me to proceed. "I think we both know I've had a hard time accepting her as your partner." My dad snorted. "While I'm glad you found someone new, I'm concerned about—" I froze, looking at Faith for help, but she was equally lost for words. "I'm concerned about how you view yourself now." My father tilted his head as if he didn't understand what I meant. "That's a truly weird statement, Jacob. I have no idea how to respond to that. I know there's a huge gap in what relationships were like between you and Mom, and I think perhaps you've had your expectations skewed. This was tough. Jacob, you're talking nonsense right now. How am I supposed to have an intelligent conversation about Cindy when you talk in circles?" My father's frustration was rising. "We know you've been navigating a complex lifestyle with Cindy, and we feel it's unhealthy. You need to get help before you pursue another relationship." My wife suddenly spoke up, articulating what I had been hesitant to say. "What? Complex lifestyle? What are you two talking about?" "A femaled relationship, Dad. One where the man accepts her being with other partners. We've learned that you're willing to let her have experiences outside of the relationship for her satisfaction, and you're trying to understand your own feelings." I was trying to build on Faith's courage. In my entire life, I had never seen the expression my dad had on his face right now. He stood up and walked around the kitchen. "You think I'm encouraging Cindy in this way?" He quickly looked at Faith. "Sorry for my language." "Dad, I caught glimpses of it. When I confronted her, she claimed you were okay with it. She even challenged me to bring it up at the risk of embarrassing you. She tried to create tension between Faith and me. My dad's eyes immediately shifted to Faith. It's true, Dad. She made her lifestyle sound so appealing, normal even. Thankfully, Jacob was there to bring me back to reality. She squeezed my hand gently. When she admitted her involvement with others, she said the same thing to me. You said you caught her? He looked at me, and I summarized our earlier encounter. He went into deep thought with all this information. Harry, are you all right? Faith moved to his side. Well, she's right about one thing. I'm embarrassed. Embarrassed that I had no idea this was going on. His eyes came alive again. Oh, she tried her modern lifestyle with me, but I made it clear that wasn't how I lived. I gave her the option to find someone who wanted that, but she assured me I was more important. Apparently, she was not being truthful. Faith looked at me, and her smile slowly crept out. I returned her smile, and soon we were both trying hard not to laugh, but Faith finally broke into giggles, and I joined her. What's so funny? My dad looked perplexed. Not being truthful? Who says that anymore? What are you, 90? Oh, shut up, you two. His gruff demeanor was short-lived as he began to chuckle with us. I'm going to sleep in the den. Tomorrow we're going to visit my ex-girlfriend. He patted my shoulder as he walked past us. Good night, Dad, I called out as he exited the kitchen. I awoke to the distant sounds of giggling. I tapped Faith's shoulder to wake her and threw on my housecoat. The girls could self-entertain for a little while, but trouble was always looming. Following the noise to the kitchen, I found April standing on a stool, still in her pajamas, trying to flip pancakes. Kendra was perched on a chair, trying to juice an orange. My dad was beside her, coaching her on how to twist. The kitchen was a complete mess. Dad, go away! April admonished me. Yeah, Daddy, we're making you and Mommy breakfast, Kendra piped up. I looked at my dad, and his smile told me he had everything somewhat under control, so I turned around and left them to it. Faith walked down the stairs and gave me a confused look, wondering why I was standing outside the kitchen. Dad and the girls are making us breakfast. I chuckled when I saw the concern in her eyes. Oh yeah, the kitchen's a mess, but they are in their glory right now. That seemed to ease Faith's worry. Them or your dad? She smiled. Both. Everything was crispy, even the pancakes, but we ate whatever the girls put on our plates. My dad almost spit out his coffee at the face I made when I tried my eggs. They were that bad. But to the girls, it was the best breakfast ever. They glowed when Faith praised them for their hard work. It was Grandpa's idea, April spoke up. He woke us up and told us we were making breakfast for the family. I glared at my father, and he raised his coffee mug in my direction. You're welcome, he snickered before taking a sip. A little after noon, Dad decided it was time to address the Cindy situation. At first, we were all going, but no one knew for sure how she would react, and we didn't want the kids to hear or see any potential chaos. Faith quickly announced she would stay back with the girls, believing it was best for me to go. We agreed my father would go in by himself, and I would show up 15 minutes later for support. You really think you'll get to the bottom of it in 15 minutes? I questioned. Like a Band-Aid, son. It's got to come off quickly. I'm not one for a long, drawn-out process. I hugged him and gave him his 15-minute head start. With a kiss from all my girls, I jumped into my car and drove towards who knew. I occupied myself with thoughts of how this could unfold. My greatest fear was that she might be aggressive. But my dad would never hit a woman no matter what. I was just not sure I could manage my own reactions after how she manipulated our family. I arrived a little late, parked my car, and mentally prepared for anything once I entered the house. I let myself in and looked around. Neither was visible, but I could hear muffled voices, so I followed them to the kitchen. When I rounded the corner, I saw my dad sitting in a chair with Cindy on her knees, her head in his lap. She was mumbling something, but I couldn't make it out, and from the look on my dad's face, he couldn't either. I took a few steps in, and the floor creaked. I'd forgotten about the loose boards. The noise caught Cindy's attention, and she looked towards me, her makeup a mess, resembling a raccoon. You! She yelled, rising to her feet. You and your lies! You were so threatened that I was taking your dad! You made up all these stories! I was stunned. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to twist this on me. I was quickly brought back to reality after her right hand made contact with my cheek. She wound up her left, but I was ready for it, grabbed both her wrists and spun her like we were dancing, gently pinning her arms across her chest. "Easy, Cindy. Remember, you were the one who told me to confront my father. I'm guessing you didn't truly think I was going to—" She screamed and wiggled, trying to break my grip when my father stood in front of her. "Cindy, Cindy, Cindy." His raised voice finally got her to stop. "It doesn't have to end like this. You wanted a lifestyle that I would never be comfortable with, and you knew that. It's obvious that it's important to you, so why don't we walk away as friends and move on?" I felt the tension leave her body, and with a nod from my dad, I released her arms and stepped back. She put her hands over her face and cried some more. My father leaned in and wrapped her in a warm hug. I moved to the kitchen table and took a seat. I didn't need to be a part of this. "I'm so sorry, Henry. I really do love you," she spoke through her tears. "You helped me live again, Cindy." "While I could never condone the way you live your life, I can't deny that you taught me how to feel for a woman again. But I think we both knew this wasn't a forever kind of thing. We're too different." "I could change," Cindy weakly offered. "I think we both know that any change would be short-lived. You have too much energy. Want too many adventures." I watched them pull apart, and despite how I felt, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. My father gently led her to the bedroom, where he helped her pack the most important things. He offered to pack up everything else and deliver it to wherever she needed it to go. An hour later, he was escorting her to the door. An Uber was waiting in the driveway. She looked at me and glared at me in such a way that I knew I would forever be on her bad side, and I was okay with that. "Cindy, if I could be so bold and offer the advice of an older man—" She turned away from me and looked back at my dad. "Don't be in a rush to be in a relationship. This lifestyle you're looking for isn't conducive to a serious union with another. I know there could be some men out there who would accept it, maybe even want it. But if I'm being honest with you, those types of men don't deserve you. A real man would never want to take for granted someone as special as you." Okay. Even I started to tear up with that speech. My dad escorted Cindy to her ride and even stood while the vehicle pulled out of sight. I walked up to him from behind and put my arm around his shoulder. That went better than I thought it would. For some reason, my dad found the comment funny, and he chuckled. "Deep down, she's a good person, Jacob. Perhaps you never saw it, but I did." I conceded to his take on her. He knew her better than I. Epilogue. Let's be honest. You know where this is going. After waiting a month out of respect, my father was quick to reconnect with Rita. It was 4 months later when she made the trip to our hometown. Her son lived here now, so she had an excuse and a place to stay, although as time progressed, she spent more time at my dad's. Faith was a bundle of nerves as we waited for my dad to bring Rita for dinner. When his truck pulled up, I thought I saw Faith bounce up and down on her feet. She was more excited than I was. She was right. My father was the man of old, and the fire had returned to his soul. He smiled freely, and even though he always doted over my girls, he was over the top every time he got to spend time with them now. I even caught him playing with their toys one day. I wish I had gotten a picture of that. I was out back, checking the BBQ, when I heard Faith announce they were here. I checked my roast, smiling at the perfect temperature. I took it off the spit and wrapped it in foil. While I did this, I could hear the girls talking a mile a minute inside. I hoped Rita wasn't being overrun by their lively personalities. As I carried the roast into the house, I couldn't shake the butterflies in my stomach. What did she look like? Would she like me? Would I like her? I felt foolish even thinking about these things. If my dad was happy, I'd find a way to be happy for him. As Faith walked into the kitchen, I set the roast on top of the stove. I looked at her for some reaction. What did she think of the woman who captured my father's heart? "So?" I asked. "So what?" she replied playfully. "So what's she like?" Mister, you need to make your own decision." She kissed my cheek. "Can you help me get some drinks?" Faith had a tray for her wine, my dad's beer, and the girls' juice, leaving me to carry my beer and a glass of wine for our guest. Faith led the way, stopping at the doorway, looking over her shoulder at me, and winked. She gave her bottom a little shake and walked into the living room. Did I tell you my wife was charming? Anyway, I walked into the living room and was met with the chatter of little girls. Kendra was on the lap of our guest, April beside her on the couch, snuggled close. "Daddy, come meet Grandma Rita." Kendra's comment caused a brief silence. "Sweetheart, Rita is our guest. Don't make her feel uncomfortable," I gently reminded my daughter. "It's okay. I think it's sweet," Rita replied, her voice calm and warm. I met her eyes and was struck by the kindness in them. She politely asked Kendra to move and stood in front of me. She was petite, with a gentle smile and a presence that instantly put others at ease. "You must be Jacob," she said, bringing me back to the moment. Yes. Nice to meet you, Rita," I responded, handing her the wine glass I had been holding. She thanked me and turned to my dad. "Sweetheart, could you hold this for me?" she asked with a soft smile. My dad stood and took it from her with a quiet grin. Rita turned back to me. "So, you're the one I have to impress if I want to be with your father," she teased lightly. The small smile on her lips told me she was as nervous as I was. "That's funny. I thought you were the one I had to impress to make sure my dad stayed in my life," I replied, letting a smile slip through. "You're a spitting image of your dad, but I can see your mom's eyes full of life and character," she said, and her words touched me deeply. Suddenly, she stepped forward and gave me a heartfelt hug. "Your mom would be so proud of you and your family." In that moment, I finally understood what my dad meant when he told me about Rita. I hugged her back, holding in the wave of emotion that came over me. "And my father didn't do you justice, Rita. Are you sure you want to settle for an old guy like him?" I joked, making everyone laugh. Faith giggled, and my dad let out a playful scoff. As soon as I let Rita go, my girls crowded around her again, eager to sit with her. If she was overwhelmed, she hid it well. She looked completely at ease. After some light conversation with the girls, I excused myself to go carve the roast. I had just finished sharpening my knife when Faith entered the kitchen. "Need any help, sweetie?" "Could you grab the platter for me?" I asked. She pulled the large plate from the cupboard and placed it beside me. "Well," she asked with a smile, "I like her. She's just like Dad described." She reached for my hand and gently took the knife from me, placing it aside. She gave me a warm hug and leaned close. "You felt it too, didn't you?" she whispered. After a moment of quiet reflection, I nodded. She smiled and kissed my cheek before walking out with a cheerful sway, her laughter trailing behind her. "Have I ever told you how much I love my wife?"